You wake up and within 60 seconds it starts. The phone. The notifications. The low-grade anxiety that hums beneath everything like a wire vibrating inside your chest. Before you've even opened your eyes all the way, you're already reacting. Already reaching. Already reaching for something, scrolling toward something, bracing for something. And here's what nobody tells you. That reflex, that impulse to move, to respond, to engage, to do something, anything, right now, that reflex is not power. It's the opposite of power. It's the most expensive mistake you make every single day, and you make it before you even get out of bed. Most people think power is about what you do. The truth is, the most dangerous people in any room are the ones who can sit still while everyone else panics. That's the thesis. The most powerful move you will ever make is doing nothing. Not nothing in the lazy sense. Not nothing in the giving up sense. Nothing in the deliberate, disciplined, razor-sharp sense. The pause that changes everything. The silence that wins the war. The stillness that makes your action, when it finally comes, devastating. Let me say it plainly. Stillness is not the absence of power. Stillness is power in its most concentrated form. Think about what happens to you on a normal day. You get an email that rubs you the wrong way, and within seconds you're typing a response. Someone says something that stings, and before the words have even landed, you're already crafting your comeback. A problem appears on the horizon, and your whole body screams at you to fix it, to act, to move, to do something, anything, because doing nothing feels like losing. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Most of your worst decisions were made in the first 30 seconds of feeling something. Most of the damage in your life, the relationships you fractured, the opportunities you sabotaged, the bridges you burned, all of it happened because you could not sit still. You could not wait. You could not let the wave pass through you without grabbing onto it. Seneca understood this better than almost anyone who ever lived. He spent years studying anger, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as a force that destroys lives, topples empires, and turns rational human beings into animals. And what he found was something deceptively simple. Anger doesn't start as a fire. It starts as a spark. A tiny, almost invisible flicker. Someone cuts you off in traffic. A colleague takes credit for your work. A friend says something careless. And in that first moment, there's a spark. That's all it is. A spark. But here's where it gets dangerous. The spark doesn't become a fire on its own. You feed it. You feed it with interpretation. You tell yourself a story about what just happened. They did it on purpose. They don't respect me. Everyone always treats me this way. Nobody values me. And with each thought, each interpretation, each story you weave, you're pouring fuel on that spark. You're turning a momentary flicker into a blaze. And once the blaze takes hold, you're no longer in control. The fire is. Seneca's insight was that anger is not something that happens to you. It's something you build, brick by brick, thought by thought, interpretation by interpretation, in the seconds between the event and your response. And that means you have a choice. You always have a choice. But only if you can do something that almost no one is willing to do in the moment. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You feel the spark, and instead of feeding it, you watch it. You sit with it. You let it burn itself out without adding a single piece of kindling. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the hardest things a human being can learn to do. Because every instinct you have, every cultural message you've absorbed, Every impulse wired into your nervous system is telling you to act. To respond. To defend. To explain. To justify. To fight. Doing nothing in that moment feels almost unbearable. It feels like weakness. It feels like surrender. It feels like letting someone win. But here's the truth that Seneca discovered and that you need to internalize if you want to live a life that you actually respect. The person who can hold still while the spark burns is not weak. That person is the most dangerous person in the room. Because while everyone else is consumed by the fire, they're watching. They're seeing clearly. They're gathering information. They're conserving energy. And when they finally move, their move is precise, calculated, and devastating. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. Picture a meeting where someone attacks your idea. Your instinct is to defend. To push back. To match their energy with your own. Your voice rises. Your heart pounds. Your jaw tightens. And before you know it, you're in an argument that has nothing to do with ideas and everything to do with ego. You've given away your power. You've let someone else set the tempo. You've let their spark become your fire. Now picture the alternative. Same meeting. Same attack. But this time, you do nothing. You don't nod. You don't defend. You don't react. You just sit. You let the words hang in the air. You let the silence do what silence does to people who are used to getting a reaction. It unsettles them. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to sit with what they just said. And you watch. You watch their body language shift. You watch the confidence waver. You watch them start to over-explain, to backpedal, to fill the silence with more words, more rope. And when you finally speak, your voice is calm. Your words are few. Your point is clear. And the room knows, without you having to say it, who is in control. That's what stillness does. It doesn't just protect you. It projects power. It changes the dynamic of every room you walk into. But here's the thing. You can't access that kind of stillness in the heat of the moment if you haven't built it in the quiet moments. Stillness is not a switch you flip. It's a muscle you develop. And like any muscle, it atrophies when you don't use it and strengthens when you do. So let's talk about how you build it. Because this is where most people get it wrong. They think stillness is something you find. Something you stumble into on a retreat or a vacation or a quiet weekend. But stillness is not found. Stillness is built. Through daily, deliberate, often uncomfortable practice. Here's the first practice. Every morning, before you touch your phone, before you check a single notification, before you let the world pour its demands into your skull, you sit. You sit in a chair or on the floor or at the edge of your bed, and you do nothing for 5 minutes. Not meditation with an app. Not breathing exercises with a timer. Just sitting. Just being aware that you're sitting. Just letting the discomfort of inaction wash over you without reaching for a distraction. And the discomfort will come. You'll feel restless. You'll feel the urge to check something, to plan something, to solve something. That urge is the very thing you're training against. Every time you sit with that urge and don't act on it, you're strengthening the pause. You're widening the space between stimulus and response. You're building the capacity that will save you when it matters. Because one day, someone is going to say something that makes your blood boil. One day, you're going to get an email that threatens something you care about. One day, the world is going to push you, and in that moment, the 5 minutes of morning stillness you've been practicing will be the difference between a reaction you regret and a response that commands respect. Here's the second practice. When something triggers you, whether it's a text message, a comment, a look, a situation, you impose a mandatory delay. No response for at least 1 hour. Not 1 minute. 1 hour. For anything that stirs you emotionally. If it's truly urgent, 1 hour won't change anything. If it's not urgent, 1 hour will save you from yourself. Most things are not urgent. Most things only feel urgent because your nervous system is hijacked by a spark you haven't learned to let burn out. The 1 hour rule forces you to sit with the discomfort of not responding. It forces the spark to either die on its own or grow into something you can see clearly enough to handle. And here's what you'll discover, and this is something nobody tells you. Most sparks die on their own. Most anger, most urgency, most of the panic that drives you to act impulsively, it evaporates when you give it time. It was never real. It was never the fire you thought it was. It was a flicker that you would have turned into a blaze by feeding it with your immediate, unthinking response. Seneca said that the greatest remedy for anger is delay. Not because delay solves the problem, but because delay reveals that most problems aren't problems. They're interpretations. And interpretations dissolve in stillness. Now let's talk about the deeper layer here, because this isn't just about anger management. This is about power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. There's a principle that runs through centuries of strategic thinking, from ancient courtiers to military commanders to the Stoics who tested their philosophy in war, exile, and loss. The principle is this. Timing is everything. And the person who controls the timing controls the outcome. Most people are always in a hurry. They rush to respond. They rush to decide. They rush to act. And hurry, that visible, anxious, breathless hurry, it betrays something. It betrays a lack of control. A lack of trust in yourself and in time. When you rush, you're telling everyone around you that you're not in command. That you're being pulled by forces you can't withstand. That you're reacting, not directing. The person who moves slowly, deliberately, who seems to have all the time in the world, that person is terrifying. Because everyone else is exhausting themselves, burning energy, making mistakes, revealing their hand, while that person is just watching. Waiting. Conserving. Think about it. When someone rushes toward you, desperate for an answer, desperate for a decision, desperate for your attention, what do you feel? You feel powerful. You feel in control. Because they need something from you and you don't need anything from them. The urgency is theirs, not yours. Now flip that. When you're the one rushing, when you're the one desperate to respond, to resolve, to act, you've handed your power to whoever is willing to wait longer than you. This is why doing nothing, when done with intention and discipline, is not passivity. It's strategy. It's the highest form of strategy. Because while you're doing nothing, everyone else is doing too much. They're overplaying their hand. They're revealing their intentions. They're making mistakes that they wouldn't make if they could just sit still. And you're watching all of it, gathering intelligence, conserving your energy, waiting for the moment when your action will matter most. Here's the third practice. Learn to say no to almost everything. And I don't mean no to things you don't want. I mean no to things you do want. No to opportunities that look attractive but aren't essential. No to social obligations that pull you away from your center. No to conversations that don't need to happen. No to reactions that don't need to be reactions. Most people's lives are a constant churn of yes. Yes to this project. Yes to this invitation. Yes to this argument. Yes to this emotional engagement. Yes, 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 until their calendar is full and their mind is fractured and their stillness is gone. And then they wonder why they feel scattered. Why they can't think clearly. Why they react instead of respond. Why they never feel like they're in control of their own life. You lose stillness one yes at a time. And you rebuild it one no at a time. Every no is a brick in the fortress of your inner quiet. Every no is a statement that your time, your energy, your attention, your peace, are not available for just anything. They're reserved. They're guarded. They belong to you and to the things that actually matter. This is hard. It's hard because saying no disappoints people. It creates friction. It makes you appear difficult, cold, unreachable. And if you're like most people, you've spent your whole life trying to be the opposite. Available. Responsive. Easy. Accommodating. The person who always replies, always shows up, always engages, always has something to say. But here's what nobody tells you about being that person. Being available to everyone means being unavailable to yourself. Being responsive to everything means being responsive to nothing that actually matters. Being easy to reach means being easy to control. The people who respect you, the people who truly value you, they don't value you because you're easy. They value you because there's something about you that can't be shaken, can't be rushed, can't be pulled off your center. And that something is stillness. It's the quality of a person who is not easily moved. Not because they're cold, but because they've learned that most things don't deserve to move them. Now I want to talk about what this costs you. Because there is a cost. When you start practicing stillness, when you start doing nothing instead of reacting, when you start delaying your responses, saying no, sitting with discomfort, people will misread you. They'll call you aloof. They'll say you've changed. They'll accuse you of not caring. Some will push harder, trying to provoke a reaction, trying to break through your stillness because your stillness makes them uncomfortable. It reflects back to them their own reactivity, their own chaos, their own inability to sit with themselves. And that reflection is painful. So they'll try to pull you back in. They'll try to spark you. They'll try to get a rise out of you. And in those moments, the temptation to break your stillness will be enormous. Because you want to prove you care. You want to prove you're engaged. You want to prove you're not cold. But here's what you need to understand. The need to prove something is itself a form of reactivity. The person who is truly still doesn't need to prove anything. They don't need to explain their stillness. They don't need to justify their silence. They don't need to defend their delay. They just hold. They hold through the discomfort of being misunderstood. They hold through the accusation of being cold. They hold through the loneliness of being the only person in the room who isn't performing. And in holding, they become something that most people will never understand and almost everyone will eventually respect. They become unshakable. Let me bring this back to you. Think about your life right now. Think about the last week. How many times did you react when you should have waited? How many times did you send a message you wish you could unsend? How many times did you say something in the heat of a moment that you spent the next 3 days regretting? How many times did you say yes when every cell in your body was whispering no? How many times did you let someone else's urgency become your emergency? How many times did you let a spark become a fire? And what did it cost you? Your peace. Your clarity. Your self-respect. You walked away from those moments feeling smaller, not bigger. Feeling drained, not powerful. Feeling like you were living at the mercy of your own impulses instead of in command of your own life. That's the cost of not being still. That's the price of constant motion. And you pay it every day, in small ways and in large ones, until you don't even remember what stillness feels like. Until doing nothing feels impossible. Until the pause feels like a threat instead of a gift. But here's the good news, and this is something I want you to really hear. Stillness is recoverable. No matter how reactive you've become, no matter how long you've been living in a state of constant motion and constant response, you can rebuild the pause. You can widen the space. You can learn to sit with the spark and let it die. You can become the person who does nothing while everyone else panics. And when you do, you'll notice something shift. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But slowly, steadily, the way real change always happens. You'll feel it in your body first. A looseness where there used to be tightness. A breath where there used to be a brace. A quiet where there used to be noise. You'll notice that things that used to trigger you don't trigger you anymore. Not because you've suppressed the trigger, but because you've stopped feeding it. You've stopped telling yourself the story that turns a spark into a fire. You've stopped interpreting, explaining, narrating every moment into a crisis. And in that quiet, you'll start to see things you never saw before. You'll see people more clearly. You'll see situations more clearly. You'll see yourself more clearly. Not because you're smarter now, but because you've stopped clouding your own vision with the smoke of constant reaction. Stillness gives you sight. It gives you the ability to perceive what's actually happening instead of what your fear or your anger or your need to control tells you is happening. And that sight, that clarity, that is the foundation of everything. Every effective action you'll ever take, every wise decision you'll ever make, every relationship you'll ever build that actually lasts, all of it grows out of stillness. Without stillness, your actions are just reactions. Your decisions are just impulses. Your relationships are just entanglements. With stillness, everything changes. Your actions become deliberate. Your decisions become wise. Your relationships become anchored in something real instead of something reactive. And here's the paradox that ties it all together. The more still you become, the more powerful your action becomes when it finally comes. Because you're no longer acting out of compulsion. You're acting out of clarity. You're no longer moving because you can't stand to sit still. You're moving because you've identified the exact moment when movement matters. There's a difference between a person who throws 1,000 punches and a person who throws one. The first person is exhausted, exposed, and eventually defeated. The second person is patient, precise, and devastating. Stillness is what makes you the second person. It's what turns your action from noise into signal. From volume into impact. From doing something into doing the right thing. So let me bring you back to where we started. You wake up. The phone buzzes. The notifications stack up. The anxiety hums. And for the first time, you don't reach. You don't scroll. You don't brace. You just sit. You sit in the stillness that you've built, day by day, practice by practice, no by no, pause by pause. And you let the world wait. Not because you don't care. Because you've finally learned that the world can wait. That most of what feels urgent isn't. That most of what demands your attention doesn't deserve it. That most of what triggers you is a spark that would die if you just let it. And in that sitting, in that doing nothing, you are more powerful than you have ever been. Because you are no longer at the mercy of every impulse, every notification, every provocation, every passing emotion. You are the still center. The point that doesn't move. The person everyone else orbits around because they've lost their own center and you haven't. That is what stillness gives you. Not comfort. Not ease. Not a retreat from the world. But command of it. Command of yourself first, and through yourself, command of everything else. The most powerful move is doing nothing. Not nothing forever. Nothing for now. Nothing until the moment is right. Nothing until the spark has burned out and the smoke has cleared and you can see exactly what needs to be done and when. And then, when you move with the full weight of your stillness behind you. And that is a force nothing can withstand. Most people call this patience. The Stoics would call it mastery. I call it the most important thing you will ever learn. The most powerful move is doing nothing. Learn to disappear into the pause. Learn to let the silence speak for you. Learn to sit still while the world spins. And watch what happens when you finally move. Stay still.